at Distributech 2023, one of the sponsors of these interviews, and these are interviews with thought leaders from around North America and the globe. Our sponsors are H2 Scan. H2 Scan is the leading sensor manufacturer for hydrogen sensing in a lot of different applications, in transformers, in battery room safety, in processes and safety, in industrial, and in the future hydrogen economy. So I want to thank our sponsors, and I want to thank all of our guests, and I hope you enjoy this interview. My next guest is John Higley. John, welcome. Thank you. He's the EVP, Senior VP, something VP of a company that's in the Initiate program here at Distributech. And that means there's some late stage of startup. You can talk about that in a minute. But John, tell me about the background. It's prosumer grid.
Right, exactly.
I love that. I keep saying the wrong thing,
but
I got it right.
You got it and you got it. You can be both a producer and a consumer.
And I like that, because that's exactly the way things are going. So that's what we're going to talk a lot about. But before we get there, tell me a little bit about your background in the power industry.
Well, roughly about 40 years. I started out with Deloitte in the consulting side and got interested in utilities, had a number of utility clients and work. My greatest claim to fame in those early days was in 1978. The city of Key West, Florida, was not connected to the North American grid. Most people don't know that or even think about that. Yeah. And I did the system planning work for the Electric Keys Co-op, which goes from Marathon, south of Miami, down to the island of Key West. Yeah. And we ended the end of that project, I'll short it for you, was we got the co-op buying all their power wholesale from Florida Power and Light, because Florida Power and Light could make it a lot cheaper than than a little co-op on the island. Yeah. And the general manager at the time of this co-op was a forward-thinking guy, and so he looked at me and he said, "So all this amount of money that you claim we're going to save, how comfortable are you that that's real?" And I looked at him and I said, "Well, at the 100% level, I'm maybe 80% confident. If you drop down to the 75% of the dollars, I'm 100% confident. You're gonna make that." He said, "Well, let me tell you what we're going to do then. We're going to build the transmission line from the Turkey Point nuclear units all the way down the Keys and bring Key West onto the North American grid."
Wow.
And that's how it happened.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Now, you and I have something in common, and that commonality is our where we went to school, right?
That's exactly right. Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech. I'm a rambling wreck, as you are.
Absolutely. Go Jackets.
Yes, and yeah, we don't really talk about our football team too much, do we? Right.
Not anymore.
But you know what every Georgia graduate calls a Georgia Tech graduate 5 years after they graduate?
No, what?
Boss man. Because the Georgia Tech. Yeah, anyway.
Exactly.
Sorry, I hope, didn't mean to offend the Georgia graduates out there. Love the Bulldogs.
I got lots of good friends
there.
I
love the Bulldogs.
Yeah.
So now, how did you get involved with prosumer grid?
Well, I actually left the firm and went with my first startup in 1980, and we built very shortly 5 software systems for the electric and natural gas business. Not customer systems, not accounting systems, but the systems that really run the utility. Like, for example, if you have power plants, how much natural gas do you buy? How do you buy it? What's the contract of it? And we also built the first integrated resource planning tool for the industry in 1982. And as it would happen, those kinds of companies get bought out by bigger entities, of which I will not tell you whom. But then I actually went back to the firm in Deloitte in 1992 as the managing partner of the energy and utility practice, and did that until they made me retire. And then my wife is famous for saying, after about 30 days, "What are you doing?" And she really did. She looked at me, "I'm used to you leaving at 7 and coming home at 6. I like that." So I went into doing renewables. I thought the new thing at the time was distributed energy. Looked like where we were going. We were going to move all this stuff down here. And so I actually formed a really nifty company, I think, Energy and Environmental Enterprises. and I started doing renewable energy. My first gig was a feasibility study for NextEra for the wind farms they did in Kansas in like '06 or '05. And so actually it's the Georgia Tech connection that really gets me here, because one of my friends in the research center said to me, do you know Santiago Guevara in the EE department, the power systems? And I said, well, I know who he is, but I don't really know him. He fixed us up for lunch, and Santiago said, would you come to my lab, which is where all the graduate students make a couple presentations on what you've done and how things go. And then he said, why don't you stay in the lab and kind of help me out? And long story short is a few of his graduate students and he and another professor and I created Prosumer Grid because we saw that there was a void at that time, still is for that matter. Both utilities and independent power producers, or even solar developers, microgrid companies, where do you put all the distributed energy? Where does it go on the grid that makes the grid stronger? Sustainability, reliability. And that's not to say that you shouldn't make money by putting rooftop solar, or if you've got a business and you want to make a microgrid because you want to be more reliable, more so than the grid, is, that you shouldn't go do that. But we feel keenly that the real crux of the matter right now is, as you know, DERs are exploding. But where do they go? From two standpoints. One is the power flow, which we've always done for years, and we model that too. But the next thing, and the real critical stuff that I see, is you do an economic dispatch of all the renewables on the feeders coming out of the substations down at the distribution level. Just like the power plants, get distributed next hourly rates if you're in PJM or something like. We got to do the same thing on the distribution. It's like, okay, well, man, it's not. Here in San Diego, it's a lot of sun today, but some days, the other day, it was pretty cloudy. Well, the answer is you really need a distributed energy. You got some solar, you got to have a battery storage sitting there. And by the way, if you really want to come off the grid at certain times, where's that power coming from? Is it green hydrogen, or electric vehicles back to the grid? We're modeling all that so that we can actually tell. And our primary clients are really the distribution utilities. Tell them where on the distribution system to put distributed energy that really increases reliability and sustainability.
That's amazing. So it's been about 4 years since the company started up?
Yep.
Okay. Do you have any betas going on? Do you have any projects that you can talk about?
Yes, the answer is we've got lots of projects. Our biggest claim to fame at this point is we did the grid redesign of Puerto Rico in 2019 and 2020 with this software system, and so what we've done for the last really 2 to 3 years, since the software's finishing being built and adding the new features, is we've really been consultants or analytical services. We've done EV vehicle hub for a company which was really pretty interesting. It's a microgrid, and they wanted to go to basically the expressways and have a place where you pull in to charge it. Well, what does it look like? Well, you got solar panels on the top, right? We got some battery storage over here. In this particular case, we got a standby generator. And then, by the way, we also hooked up to the local utility because, 4 o'clock in the morning, guess what? This local utility's got the cheapest power going, so maybe we didn't get those batteries charged. How do you charge them? Run your diesel generator? No, just go to the grid. Because if you're charging electric vehicles, it's a 24/7 by 365, and you can't have the grid go down. The utility can't go down. So that we've done those kind of studies. We're just wrapping up a really interesting study in terms of looking at EV penetration on the distribution system, and California here is a really good example of where if you look at the zip codes and look at the economics of the zip codes, and you see that all of a sudden on this one feeder, not 2 electric cars, everybody on that street's going to have an electric car. Well, you have just now changed the dynamics of the load on that one distribution feeder. And what's driving the utilities crazy is, well, wait a minute, my substation back here won't handle that kind of load. Even if even if the charging all happens at night.
Right.
So we're looking at that kind of thing.
So when you think about the problem that it sounds like you got a lot of problems you're solving, is the solution ultimately is it a software solution, a consulting solution, a hardware solution, or all of the above?
It's all of the above.
Okay.
Our niche, I love niche markets myself. I like the idea that I can take this market and go in big time, and I don't want to say control it, but have a major impact, as opposed to trying to spread myself out, across the whole thing. So our niche is a planning niche. For example, we can take, this building and do a microgrid design for it, but we're completely product agnostic. I don't care whose solar panels they use. I don't care whose battery storage. And by the way, on batteries, we actually look at 3 technologies now, because we've had one battery company, it's not a lithium-ion guy, come to us and say, my battery is going to be replacing their batteries, and I want you to model it when you look at these kinds of things. So I think of it, it's really a planning tool.
Okay, a modeling tool, planning tool.
It models, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, and when you say it models, again, is it a software that models?
It's the software.
Okay, and then you can package that to do that.
Its name, by the way, if I can get a plug in, is Grid plus DER Planning Studio. And the only reason I really want to bring up, the studio has 6 different modules.
Okay.
So for studying different things in the utilities. If you want to look at hosting capacity, which is, should I go do this with distributed generation, and how much money does that save me as a utility from having to redo a substation and, and that kind of thing. So that's one whole module of it. The optimization is a whole nother module. Another module is the energy scheduler, who actually does the economic dispatch of whether you got EVs in there or solar or green hydrogen generation.
The need for it is great because everything is changing on that side, right? There's so many things that are changing on that side. The utilities are just like, okay, how are we doing this? I like the fact that you're breaking it down into in specific areas where you can go in and model for an area, but that's good. You mentioned something about batteries, and you said, it wasn't lithium ion,
lithium
wasn't
ion,
lead acid. Was it a flow battery?
Well, I didn't tell you what it was.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
It is.
A flow battery. Okay.
It is.
All right.
It is. Right.
Because we've got a couple of companies that we've interviewed that are have some pretty dynamic solutions to battery storage, because that's going to be one of the another big issue. We've got to store it. I mean, this little company that supports us here, H2 Scan, hydrogen sensing, right?
Yeah.
Hydrogen is the future, and it always will be. Well, guess what? Hydrogen is becoming more and more the future. You can either store the power as hydrogen, or you can use hydrogen to store the power in a battery system.
Right.
But either way, it's all about storage, which is crazy.
Exactly. And storage is there's big time storage. We've finished for one of the major utilities. Actually, they came to us and said, can you model where we should put energy storage on the transmission system? And we said, sure, we can do that. Our Puerto Rico project, we modeled the transmission. So we suck in the transmission data from the utility, and we were able to tell these boys, looking at their big holding company across multiple states, and say, you got 6 points where you got problems that battery storage would solve your problem, as opposed to going the old-fashioned way and putting a diesel generator down there to just spin just to be ready so that the lights don't go out.
Yeah, amazing. There's a lot going on in the marketplace right now. I want to switch gears a little bit. If I were an engineer and I were graduating from Georgia Tech, I'd want to come to work for Prosumer Grid, right? Because it's pretty exciting. There's a lot of good exciting. But many places are having a difficult time recruiting and getting people, and now the next generation kind of is excited about making a difference. So we do have an attractive thing to get them now. But how much does what you do support the utilities that are having a difficult time hiring high level? I'm not talking about right out of college. I'm talking about 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 years experience. They're having a hard time hiring that level of technology, and the guys that knew it, They're retiring, like you and me.
Exactly,
and unlike
right.
you and me, they're not continuing to work. They're down in Key West fishing.
Yeah,
Okay,
right.
So how does it help a utility deal with all of these labor issues that everybody's got?
Well, I think it's probably a continuation of the continuum that's been going along, mainly for our lifetime. I think we've lived in some of the most exciting, 50 years of work you possibly could. Machine learning, artificial intelligence that we're building into the software now, it's, like it or not, it replaces a human generally, or it does. So, and I think
let's say it supplements.
It's supplement. That's a much better way of looking at it. So, what I find in the fun of being with a startup again is, I don't know how exactly to say this, but the kids, the graduates, they're 30 years old, they have children of their own, but where I come from, I'm the old guy around it, but I've seen a lot more than they've seen, but they're so enthusiastic. I think part of what's happening, and one reason you see this huge Distributech thing, is here are the people that support the utilities. And a lot of the graduates and the people with 5-6 years worth of experience want to come to work for us, because the utility, frankly, and I got lots of utility friends, still a little old and a little staid sometime, and generally slower to move, even though they're moving a lot faster now. They're being forced to move.
Right.
Yeah, I had a great discussion here at the conference with one utility who said, planning as usual does not exist. There's no thing as usual anymore. We need new tools like we're building. He said, we got to have these. Otherwise, we're just going to be brought under.
It's interesting. I'd like your perspective on this. Most utilities, they got to go to a state commission. We got the Georgia Public Service Commission that bases their rates on what? Capital spending, right?
Mostly.
And that's a stupid way of doing it now, right? We need to look at a completely different model to do performance-based rates, right? If you perform,
yep.
these are the rates that you're allowed to charge, and performance can come in a lot of different categories. But it sounds like the ability to model, and you were able to take to the Public Service Commission and say, hey, we can model the savings, the cost, whatever it is, you can model it, would be a superb planning tool for state commissions to use on rate-based decisions.
I'm a big believer in performance-based pricing.
Yeah.
By the way, we're sitting in the state which was the original creator of performance-based pricing.
Yeah.
They haven't pushed it as far as I think they could, but yes, I think you're right. It's not pouring more money into assets may or may not be the right choice.
We're going to have to replace
sure.
them anyway. That's a lot of money.
Yeah,
we're going to need more of them because we've got
right.
a demand curve that's going up. But let's do it better than we've done it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's exactly. I think we're in Georgia, so we still have a nuclear plant being added to.
Yeah,
I think it's now $1 billion or $2 billion, whatever the number is over. Like, quit trying to do the large. Let's fix things down here. Anyway.
I did the original need and necessity study for Vogel 1 and 2.
Did you really?
Yeah, using our system ProMod and ProScreen back in the early 80s.
Yeah.
So it's I'm pretty familiar with it.
So when
model.
we're off camera, can you tell me why it's such a debacle right now that we can't seem to bring it
You and I'll
online?
talk about that.
Okay, we'll talk about that offline. Yeah,
but I think the other thing that I'd like to add to what you were just saying a while ago, one of the things that happened in my career, and I'll even tell you, it was in the 90s, so I'd already been 2 decades into it. I got to meet the guy, I guess, I'm not sure what his real title was, but sort of the marketing guru of AOL. And just think of AOL back then. And he taught me, or the message I took away from him is, you've always got to be looking for the new thing. We're never going to sit still, or the company that sits still dies, right? So where is the new thing in your field? It doesn't matter. He looked at me and said, I don't know much about electricity, but he said, it's got to be something new. I said, yeah, actually, we can come up with new things. And so that's kind of like, where I come from, which is, okay, well, wait a minute, what is the new thing? And how's that going to impact us?
Yeah, well, you've been doing things a long time. Here's the good news. Our utility industry has been very reluctant to change. You know, they want to be first to be second. Okay, if this proven, if you got it working at FP&L,
risk averse.
They're very risk averse.
I can't have your lights going out, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Because then that PUC guy's going to
exactly.
be on me.
So now we're at a point where they're being forced to change. They're looking for the new thing, but they're also looking for the new proven. In the old day, it was, oh yeah, let it proof out for 20 years, and most people didn't survive the 20 years for one customer to prove it. Today, if you can prove it one place, they'll line up everybody will line up for a better mousetrap.
The interesting thing that's happened across my career is, you're perfectly correct. Even with my first spin-off company, getting those first 4 licenses, for ProMod, it wasn't particularly easy, right? But then you're right, after we had 4, we ended up with 132 utilities in the country using our software, because other than it was the state-of-the-art thing and the right thing for them to go do, but as you said, it took a lot longer. Now, the interesting thing is lots of utilities have innovation groups, and and that's where we've been going to is, okay, who's in the innovation group? Now let me show you the new thing, and so that you can then go down to the operating guys in the distribution planning area and say, hey, I want you to look at this thing because it's going to help you with all these massive amounts of DERs coming on the system. Because you got to remember 2 things. Utility still does not want the lights to go out.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Cannot have the lights going out. That's
safe and reliable. They want it to be safe and reliable.
You're right.
Now we've said safe, reliable. We want you to also be resilient.
Exactly.
Because you're going to have storms that you didn't have before. And oh, by the way, now we want you to be green. It's like, oh my God, there's more change going on.
There's more change.
Which I think is nothing but
Which is, by the way,
opportunity.
why neither one of us can retire.
John, it has been great. This has been John Higley, a conversation about prosumer. I'm just fascinated by your energy and your passion for it. So thank you for what you're doing for the industry.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I greatly appreciate it.
Okay. This has been an APC Technologies production, and we thank you for joining us. Our sponsors have been H2 Scan and Distributech. And of course, the communities of APC Technologies, which is Transform Technology, Power Systems Technology, Green Energy Technology, and Women in Power Systems. So thank you.